Hi, I'm Melanie, and you're watching Yarn Journeys. I want to issue a warm welcome to those of you who are watching my channel for the first time, and also a big thank you to those of you who are returning. I'm so glad to have all of you as part of my audience. On this channel, I share with you my journeys into the fiber arts, both near home and as I travel. So on this show, I will be doing my third and last episode about my 4-week trip to Ireland. To recap, my husband and I spent our 4 weeks traveling the Wild Atlantic Way, an official route of sorts that starts down in the southernmost tip of Ireland in County Cork and goes all the way to the northernmost part in County Donegal. In this particular episode, I'll be focusing on my travels and yarny discoveries in County Mayo and County Donegal. So here's the lineup for today. We'll be first seeing Kalala Woolcraft. This is a really cool hotspot in Ballycastle in County Mayo, where you can learn to spin, you can learn to weave, you can learn to dye, and you can learn about all things Irish knitting. I'll also be showing some fabulous scenery of our trip. We'll be taking a tour of Studio Donegal, a traditional Irish woolen mill in Killala. And then finally, I'll be doing the show and tell of my finished objects and works in progress. Kalala Woolcraft is Annie Gambrills' fiber arts workshop in downtown Ballycastle. She is a spinning, weaving, and dyeing instructor, and she teaches classes and repairs spinning wheels and vintage sewing machines. She prepares fiber for sale as well as hand-spun yarn, and she also is a wood turner, so she makes knitting needles and all sorts of other fiber arts tools. She is a one-woman force for good in the Irish fiber arts community. I had a really good time wandering around her workshop, taking in the weaving looms and spinning wheels she had there. I highly recommend a visit if you ever find yourself in Ballycastle. And if it works for your schedule, unfortunately it didn't for mine, she regularly has classes open to the public. You can find her on Facebook and on Instagram. So I asked Annie, because she seemed to be very much an expert in the state of Irish fiber arts, why there didn't seem to be this sort of momentum and interest in wool and fiber like I was used to seeing in the United States and in the UK. You know, after all, there's all these sheep everywhere. And she said, you know, the momentum and interest in Irish fiber arts is growing, but it still isn't quite there yet. First of all, she explained that most of the sheep you see wandering around the pastures in Ireland are really much more raised for the meat market. That, you know, at best, the Irish sheep farmers will compost the wool, and many of them still just basically put it in the trash. There really isn't, you know, the market for that wool, as most Irish knitters find the wool fairly scratchy and difficult to work with, and they just don't have fond memories of those Irish cable knit sweaters that maybe their grandmothers knit for them when they were children and they found uncomfortable and scratchy on their skin. That said, there are some sheep farmers out there who are growing sheep for their fiber. She has a good friend, for example, who is creating a nice flock of Jacob sheep. And she also shared with me that she has a friend who has Galway sheep. Now, Galway are the original heritage breed of sheep in Ireland. Most of the sheep that you see out in the pastures of Ireland are actually descendants of English sheep brought to Ireland in the 19th century. And in fact, a lot of them reminded me of the Scottish black-nose sheep. That said, the Irish is a all-over white sheep. And Annie had recently washed some, and she gave me some fiber to play with. Now, I am a new spinner, and I have yet to gain any skill in fiber prep. And so this fleece is clean. It isn't raw, and the lanolin is all washed out, but it's still not ready to spin with. And I look forward to playing with it. But just to show you, I'm going to pull out a lock of the fiber, and it's on the longer end. I'd say that the staple length is maybe 4 to 5 inches, and it's super bouncy and stretchy because it's got a really nice tight crimp. And Annie told me that when she plays with it and spins with it, that it is, perfect for making into Aran weight singles. And in fact, as I twist it, you can totally see that, that's kind of what this yarn wants to become. So I look forward to learning how to prep this fiber and spinning it myself. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. That is some nice, strong, bouncy yarn right there. I also purchased from Annie some Shetland fiber that she had prepared mixed with some Irish dyed wool to get a nice tweedy effect. It's really pretty, and I have enjoyed playing with it on my Turkish spindles. It really is nice and easy to draft. So I look forward to playing with this more. So through her efforts in teaching, Annie really hopes to raise interest in the fiber arts, particularly in County Mayo. And she would love to get things going so that there is a fiber festival someday in Mayo, just like the ones that there are in other parts of the world. To be correct, there have been fiber festivals in Ireland in the past. She said there was one in Doolin in County Clare a few years ago, but it just hasn't really gotten the momentum going so that they're going on year after year after year. So I look forward to perhaps an Irish Fiber Festival popping up on the calendar, perhaps sometime soon. And one last note, I highly recommend that you subscribe to Kalala Woolcraft's Instagram feed. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Annie posts on almost a daily basis. She posts when her fiber arts classes will be. She displays the beautiful hand spun yarn that she's made and dyed. She talks about the vintage spinning wheels and sewing machines she works with. It's a really engrossing and interesting feed. And also, if you happen to be traveling through County Mayo in the future, you can see what Annie has going on, so perhaps you'll be able to participate. Here I am knitting on Ackle Island in County Mayo. And once we climbed up to the top of the hills, there was some incredible views. Lambing season is also calving season. Downpatrick Head in County Mayo has to be one of the most beautiful sights along the wild Atlantic Way. And there's always cute sheep to see out in the pastures. The mighty cliffs of Sleeve League. We're into the fourth week of our trip up the Wild Atlantic Way, and I'm here at Crowley Sea Arch. I think it's Crocky Sea Arch. I'm not sure the pronunciation there. You can see it right there. It's low tide, which is great because you can see more of it. Lots of rocks. My husband, who is set up behind me, is having a grand old time doing his landscape photography. And I am working on my sock here. I've now made it through the heel and onto the cuff of the first sock. The sun is out. I think my husband is going to spend a good amount of time here. So planning to get a lot done on this first sock today, and maybe even start the toe of the second sock later. The scenery of Malin Head is just breathtaking, as are the views of the Fannet Head Lighthouse. Here we are at Great Pollet Sea Arch. It's close to the end of our trip. Just a few more days left. And I am almost done with sock 1. Just have about an inch of the cuff left to do. Found a nice place to sit. My husband, who is right there, is getting his photography on while we look at this amazing sea arch. Not too windy. Might be getting to rain soon. So, not bad. So, we are here at Murder Hole Beach, or I should say it's the headlands above Murder Hole. My husband, who you can't see, is right there below me on outcropping, taking pictures of the scene down there. We got a little lost from, I shouldn't say we got lost. The trail to Murder Hole Beach from where we parked our car isn't marked, and it's very easy to mistake, sheep paths and where the water is running down the hill for an actual trail. But we found a good spot to park. We may or may not go down to the actual beach, but I finished my first sock last night and I'm on to the second one. So, no second sock syndrome for me. And it's really beautiful up here. And I've got a comfy spot to perch, so I'll probably be here for a while. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a toad. Yay! I had a great time visiting Studio Donegal in Killala. Studio Donegal is a major producer of traditional Irish tweed, which they weave on their hand-operated vintage looms. So they weave traditional Irish tweed blankets and throws and fabric for traditional Irish tweed shawls and vests and caps and all sorts of Irish tweedy goodness. And they have samples for sale in their shop in Killala. It sure was fun to watch the weavers work that 100-year-old equipment. I really love to hear the clack, clack, clack of the shuttles moving back and forth. They also sell and distribute a great selection of traditional Irish tweed yarns. So in their shop in Killala, I found a huge selection of Aran tweed, for example. And they also had woolen spun traditional Irish tweed yarn that was made with softer merino so that it was a little bit less scratchy on the skin. They distribute yarns from Donegal Yarns, which is a big spinning mill down the street, also in Killala. Studio Donegal has its own yarn milling equipment, but much of the yarns that they have for sale and that they distribute is actually made by Donegal Yarns. The tweedy yarns that they have for sale there are gorgeous, and I spoke with the owner and he was very proud of the great number of flecks that you can see in the yarn. I purchased a sweater quantity of this yarn. This is Donegal Wool Spinning Company tweed, and I think you can see that it's gray wool with lots of flecks of white and blue and red. I think it is going to look gorgeous all knitted up. I believe this is actually spun on site at Studio Donegal. Not 100% sure of that though. In any case, it is about 50% Irish wool and 50% yarn, 50% wool that comes from either Australia or New Zealand. I continued my exploration of what's going on in the Irish wool industry with the owner of Studio Donegal. And, I asked him hey, how come Irish wool isn't celebrated the way you hear about British wool or New Zealand wool? Heck, there's all the sheep that are out there in the pastures. And this is what he explained to me. Decades and decades ago, a lot of the wool from Irish sheep actually found its way into industrial uses. So Before there were modern plastics and other kinds of materials that were available, strong wool was required for industrial uses. So a lot of the Irish wool found its way into felt, and it was, used for rugs, and that those felt and rugs were often used for insulation. Nowadays, the wool isn't needed in the same way, and it has been replaced with, other kinds of materials. So, now, as I mentioned previously in the video, that Irish wool gets composted or thrown out. That said, there is a growing interest in reviving the Irish wool carpet industry, for example, and there are a growing number of Irish sheep farmers who are interested in starting to breed for fiber as well as for meat. However, within Ireland, there are no longer the wool processing facilities that there used to be. And so, for example, any wool in Ireland that ends up being made into yarn most often gets sent to England to be scoured and cleaned and processed, and then comes back to Ireland to be then spun into yarn. He explained that there just isn't enough of the usable Irish clip, which is the way that they describe the wool harvest, to actually support a wool processing facility of any size in Ireland. And now it's time for some show and tell. So first, I have a finished object. Here are my Curio socks. The pattern is by Andrea Mowry, and I am so very pleased with how these socks came out. The yarn are the Hedgehog Fibers sock minis that I got in Cork. I love the red and the speckled gray. So I decided to make the heels a different color than the toes because I really wanted to highlight the pretty speckles in the yarn, and also because I didn't quite have enough red to make the heels. But even though they do look a little bit funky, I am really happy with them, and I'm really pleased with the way that the fabric knit up. I think this is going to be really cozy for the winter, and honestly, I think these are the best socks I've ever made. I've had trouble getting gauge right for socks. Sometimes it's just too loose, and so the fabric isn't cozy enough. But these turned out just right. What's your favorite sock pattern? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for great sock patterns because I've got a nice stash of fingering sock yarn to play with. My other major work in progress is my Curdock cardigan. The pattern is by Carol Feller. Of course, the last time I showed it, it was a bolero, but now it's definitely a vest. I've made all the increases down the sides. It's got a slight A-line shape, which I believe is going to be quite flattering once it's all knit up. and I'm almost at the ribbing for the waist. So I have to admit that mistakes were made. Now, if I'm able to catch a mistake soon enough, I will ladder down and fix it. However, I have noticed that in the major cable in the back, sometimes I have the cables going in the twist in the wrong direction. So, you know, the way I knit cable knit sweaters, what I tend to do is try and memorize the cable pattern and rely on my ability to read my knitting in order to figure out how I should go about doing things. You know, and of course, our ability to pay attention waxes and wanes over times, and I guess there were times when I wasn't paying as good attention as I thought I was, and I got things a little bit mixed up. So I'm a bit torn. Part of me is like, oh well, Melanie, you messed up the cable, you gotta rip back and at least to where the first mistake was and knit it over again correctly. And I know that there are diligent knitters who would do exactly that. But the other part of me is like, well, you know, you can't really tell, and that's what makes this sweater uniquely yours. It will be like no one else's Curdock cardigan. And I don't know, what do you think? I mean, can you see where the pattern got a little wrong? What would you do? Would you rip back? Or would you just let it be? Let me know what you think I should do in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you think. Of course, my other major work in progress is my spin for the Tour de Fleece. I'm not going to talk about that in detail here because I am vlogging daily about it. If you'd like to know more about my Tour de Fleece spin, every day that there is a stage of the Tour de France, I will be putting out a vlog, and that is happening throughout July. So we've come to the end of this episode, and therefore we've also come to the end of my episodes about my trip to Ireland, which I so much enjoyed. But not to worry, my next episode will be about my trip down the Blue Ridge Parkway to the Peaks of Otter Recreation Area in Southwest Virginia. I was lucky enough to take in some woolly goodness at a couple yarn shops, and I got some knitting done while we were camping there as well. So you can look forward to that. If you liked this episode, please do give it a thumbs up and a like below. It really does help the channel. And if you'd like to make sure that you don't miss another episode of Yarn Journeys, please be sure to subscribe. So, thanks so much for watching Yarn Journeys, where it's you to you around the world. See you next time.